Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 4348, the second surface transportation extension that we have considered this year. It has become eminently clear that the Republicans in the House cannot get consensus among themselves on a long-term transportation bill. They can't get consensus on a short-term transportation bill. They can barely pass this 90-day extension. And the only way to get it through is to yet again add the Keystone pipeline and other anti-environmental measures. The Republican leadership keeps playing the same cards over and over, but nobody is playing this game anymore. The Senate has moved on. The Senate passed a bipartisan bill. We should do the same. The purpose of this extension is to serve as a vehicle to formally go to conference with the Senate, and I must confess that I might be inclined to vote for it on that basis. If it passes, the House position in conference will essentially be an extension of current law, putting the policy reforms in the Senate bill on a stronger footing. But I fear that this is really just a delaying tactic and a smokescreen. For a year and a half, the House Republicans have stubbornly refused to work with Democrats to develop a bipartisan bill, completely upending the historical traditions of our committee. This is despite the fact that there are plenty of individual Republican members who are willing to work with us on certain issues. When H.R. 7, the original Republican long-term reauthorization bill, was introduced, several Republican members joined me on an amendment to preserve the transit funding that would have been gutted in H.R. 7. That was probably one of the reasons that H.R. 7 was ultimately pulled before it could get to the floor. So there are clearly members on the other side of the aisle who would work with us to develop a bipartisan bill. But the Republican leadership stubbornly refuses to let that happen. Why should we expect anything different in conference? The Republican leadership could also just bring up the Senate bill, but they won't even allow a vote. Why? What are they afraid of? Because they know it would probably pass. And what would be wrong with that? The Senate bill isn't perfect, but it's a bipartisan compromise measure that will put people to work right away and provide more certainty to the transportation agencies than a stream of short-term extensions. We could resolve this situation right now, but they continue to block legislation that would likely pass both chambers on a bipartisan basis and be signed into law by the President. I hope that my concerns about the intent of the other side of the aisle turn out to be unwarranted. I hope that if this extension passes, it will ultimately move the process along in a positive manner, that we will have a meaningful conference that produces a good bipartisan bill. Passing an extension is certainly better than passing H.R. 7, but given what has transpired so far, and given the addition of the Keystone pipeline and other environmental measures, I must reluctantly vote no.